sister's a therapist and I tell jokes. We both want to help all kinds of folks.
Hello, and welcome to the podcast. My sister's a therapist. I named it that because my name's Virginia Jones and my sister's a therapist.
Hello, I'm Laura Ryan. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, but my first and only credit is sister to Virginia Jones, funny person.
I currently carry no licenses nor certifications of any sort. I used to have a food handler's license, but that is expired. I do have a driver's license.
I had a bartending thing. Did you?
I never had a bartending accreditation. If you see me bartending in public, it's illegal. We're doing an illegal act. I am qualified and accredited to teach after-school programs to children.
There you go.
In the state of California.
Licensed to carry a microphone. How about that? Do you need a license for that?
That's right. I've got a creative license. Remember when they used to give you a creative license in English and I didn't understand the pun? I'm like, okay, yeah, so now I can do it.
No, nobody ever gave me that.
Yeah,
it's just your class.
Before we start, I'd like to send a very special shout out on the airwaves to a listener, James B., representing the Nunhead Massive. What up, James?
I would also like to shout out to our one Italian listener. I don't know who you are, but I love you.
Ciao, baby. Laura, we've got a very special episode today. It's your episode, but we want to start with a warning. If you're playing the dad drinking game, if you take a shot every time we mention our dad, we need you to put the alcohol away. Maybe get yourself a lemonade, a Mountain Dew.
And we don't mean a Mike's Hard Lemonade.
No, because our dad's birthday is coming up and Laura has planned an all dad episode. So if you take a shot every time we mention our dad in this episode, you will die.
Yes. Today's episode is the ultimate oops, all dad.
And honestly, we can't afford the drop in listenership. So we
really need you to be alive and well.
We really need you. When were you inspired to do this topic?
What I've noticed is that we bag on dad almost every episode. And so I thought, you know what? For his birthday, let's go ahead and celebrate by not bagging on him for one episode.
I think that's really nice.
I probably will inevitably bag on him a little, but it's not going to be the focus.
We're going to focus on the positives, accentuate the positive.
And I'm going to say that this was no simple feat. Trying to come up with stories about my dad that are positive was a challenge, but we got it together. I've interviewed all of my siblings and Virginia has some prepared stuff. So hopefully it'll be an interesting ride. So shall we begin at the beginning?
Is the water warm enough?
We're going to begin with Emily. These are Emily's positive memories of dad. Riding in the back of the RX-7, dad's picking me up on the weekend, and his ponytail is flying around as we listen to Phil Collins.
That's such a picture.
And her thought to herself as she remembers this are the words, "This is so cool."
Oh, my father and his second wife had matching Mazda RX-7s. Red and black.
Yes, she had the red one. He had the black one. That was an interesting thing. When they were having a good day,
right,
they would park the cars facing each other. And when they were having a bad, when they were having a bad day, they were on the opposite side of each other.
And truly, it was Cheryl making that determination.
I'm sure. Well, I mean, she was probably the one who was deciding whether they were having a good or bad day also. They didn't last forever because the tax man came and took them. But while they lasted, at least for Emily, it was pretty fun. I didn't find it particularly fun because trying to get to school when there are 4 children in the car, it was difficult.
It was not a car designed for children. It was not a car he got thinking about children.
It was just a car that he got because he was entering his midlife crisis. It's probably actually not midlife.
Yeah, if you crunch the numbers, he had his midlife crisis when I was 5.
Another positive memory association Emily had is playing the triangle pegboard game on the patio with dad. I don't know what the name is. I looked it up, but I couldn't find anything.
You always see it in a barbershop in Texas. You always see it, of course, at a Cracker Barrel.
So the way it works, if you haven't played it yet, is there's a bunch of pegs and then there's one missing. And so the goal is to get down to one peg and win the game. I rarely won, but I did enjoy playing it with him as well. We would sit outside and smoke cigarettes together on the patio and play that. Or we would play dominoes.
What else did Emily say?
Emily said that our father was her number one listener when she did college radio. Her radio show was called The Roaming Gnome, and he listened every week because it was an internet-only radio show. And so at the time, not many people were listening to that sort of thing. It was before the advent of podcasting. He was her number one listener. Coincidentally, when I had a radio show at the same university, also on the internet, my father was my number one listener as well.
That is really cute.
They would get mad at me because you weren't ever supposed to play top 40, but I always did because I knew my dad was listening. So I would play Neil Young and Tom Petty and stuff. They didn't like that, but it didn't matter because he was also my number one fan.
When you're doing a job you're not getting paid for, you find you can do whatever you want.
True. When Emily was in high school, our dad recorded the radio show Breakfast with the Beatles for her every week and mailed her cassettes.
Breakfast with the Beatles, it comes out of Los Angeles at KLOS FM and it's syndicated nationally. That's a fun fact for everyone.
He also called Emily every week when she was in New York.
Now, Emily and I both twigged on two favorite bands of our dad's. My band was The Who and hers was the Beatles. So we kind of, my dad was a boomer, you guys. But if you specialized in one of his specializations, you would find he would have a lot of time for that. He actually took me and my high school boyfriend to see The Who at a stadium show in Dallas. And it was really fun seeing a show with my dad. As we were walking up to the stadium, someone approached me and tried to sell me acid. And I said, not now. My dad is here.
Tommy, can you hear me? The most surprising memory Emily had, because I knew about all of the other ones, but this one was news to me. Apparently, when Emily got into the ITP program at NYU, that was Interactive Telecommunications Program, our dad got super excited about it. And she said a light went off when she got in. And he would, on a regular basis, make videos for her, showing her how to do these things that she was learning.
That's really cute.
Right? So she said he would send videos trying out new circuit boards and sharing knowledge about new technology and teaching her things.
When we were little and I was programming in Basic A, he got really into promoting and supporting that.
And I think that was the tricky part for me. I never cared about any of the things he cared about. If you showed even the smallest bit of interest in the things he was interested in, he would go all the way with you. But I just didn't have any interest. Now we're going to move to Robbie. He liked buying things and showing he cared by doing that. I started getting into music electronics in the late 1980s, and he would take me to Guitar Center, and I would play him a couple of notes on a synth, and he decided right then and there to buy me my own keyboard. I asked for a Casio keyboard, but he decided to spend close to $2,000 buying me a top-of-the-line synthesizer and computer setup. This is not an insignificant purchase now, and certainly was not then. He also liked to encourage my interest in computer gaming, so he would spend money buying me interactive games.
Interactive fiction was a big touchstone with my dad. I was playing games like Adventure and Zork, and we would play them together. And that was certainly something we spent a lot of time on together. And I'm still super interested in interactive fiction. I am the nerd that when those games started to have a visual component and later just became visual games, I was like, well, those are ruined.
Robbie and I once, famously for the two of us, stayed home from school and pretended to be sick so that we could play King's Quest all day because we were trying to solve it.
Hells yes.
We're definitely not ADHD kids.
And the great thing about King's Quest is that solving it a lot of the time was just dragging your cursor across the screen until you found one pixel that changed. And you're like, that's where the magic mushroom is.
But sometimes that takes all night and all day because we had stayed up all night the night before and then woke up first thing and said, we're not going to school. We're going to solve this game.
One time, my sisters came to stay with me for Christmas in Portland, Oregon, and I had just acquired Karaoke Revolution, which is a video game where you sing songs in a very strange robotic way. I would get up and go to work, and they were singing Karaoke Revolution, and I would come home, and they were still singing it. Like Emily lying on the couch, exhausted, singing the most passive way possible, but still like playing the game.
Yeah, ADHD is real. And hyperfocus is real. Robbie also has a Zork memory. One time there was a game called Zork that Dad grabbed on a business trip, but he left it on a tram by accident. He postponed his flight and went back to get it because he didn't want to disappoint me.
That is sweet.
See, a broken clock is right twice a day.
Broken man is right twice a life. Robbie was telling me one of his high school memories. Dad worked long hours and was not always available during the day, but he would sometimes take us grocery shopping in the middle of the night. It's just the people of the streets and day shift workers and us. And that was always an adventure.
Well, I remember the bill was always $300 or something because we'd buy 800 frozen dinners and stuff.
Yeah, everything at that time was very much towards pre-prepared foods and meals because the only thing that you and I knew how to make was rice-a-roni.
I didn't know how to make that.
That's right. I knew how to make rice-a-roni. I'm the genius.
I learned how to boil spaghetti from my friend Tommy Kirby.
Oh,
Rest in power. Robbie also said, I asked him if he ever learned anything from dad. And he said, when I graduated, he told me the internet was, quote, what's happening, end quote.
yeah. Our dad always had the bleeding edge of technology. He had a Palm organizer before Palm Pilots and stuff. I remember, and he was always very excited to share technology. Like I came home from college and he had a CD-ROM set that was a map of the United States. So it was before MapQuest and before Google Maps. He's like, you can look up any street in the US on this thing. And he was having me tell him my friends' home addresses that I had. And then we would go look at their street on the CD-ROM.
That is very dad. That is very dad vibes. That's probably something he would do today.
Yeah.
Robbie said, when I was getting a divorce, I placed a lot of blame on my ex. And he told me, quote, it takes two people to F up a marriage, end quote.
That is something he shared with me as well. And when you are ending a marriage or ending a relationship, it's very difficult to hear. But as a man who plowed through 2 marriages himself, it's true. I was an active participant in my broken marriage.
Absolutely. I can't start a fight with myself.
No.
There are 2 people involved. Robbie also said, I think he listened to your podcast. I hope that's true. And I hope he's listening to my podcast now. And Dad, I don't know where you are, but if you can write me an Apple review from the beyond.
5 stars, please.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, we're going to get a review called jrr.houston.net.
Robbie said the best moment I ever shared with him was when we were at a super salad and he talked about infinite numbers for 37 minutes.
You know, there's some things that you don't have to ask yourself, is that a true story? That's 100% a true story.
Yes. This one involves one of my exes. When I was sitting with he and David, he said something. David took a beat because David was always trying to get Dad to say something weird. That was his kink.
Not hard to do.
Dad was explaining something and David took a beat and said, is it like Qbert? Dad took a drag from his cigarette. In the most matter-of-fact tone, he said, it's nothing like Qbert. David giggled, and it was so profound. Robbie also said there were no cell phones or Ubers back in the day, so Dad would take us to concerts and hang out in the car until they were over, which was very sweet. Or maybe he just didn't want to go back home. I remember once he put his large, meaty hand on my forehead to check my temperature. When I met John Goodman and shook his hand, I had a visceral reaction to his large, meaty paws.
Oh, yeah. John Goodman has always given me huge dad vibes.
100%.
John Goodman seeing people like us in the Talking Heads True Stories movie, I cry every time.
I was going to say, do you cry every time?
I cry every time. So things my dad taught me, at some point he said, a girl should know how to punch.
Oh, yeah. He taught me that too. He'd hold his hand up and let me punch.
He'd hold his giant hand up and we would punch it. And then later, when I spent months and months and months training in boxing and was an instructor, and it was the 90s, everybody was kickboxing. My dad took partial credit. He said, you know, I think a lot of this was because I taught you how to throw a punch. Okay.
It's not connected.
My dad taught me how to tune a guitar. He had a couple guitar things that he would play. He played a flamenco riff that I never learned, but he played Love's Alone Again, which is a very pretty guitar pattern. I didn't realize it, but the band were not at their peak when they recorded this because Captain Sensible had left the band and he was the real genius. Dave Vanian has a pretty face and a nice haircut. But they covered Alone Again or by Love. And my dad heard me listening to it and he picked up a guitar and played this beautiful guitar intro that's very complex. And I thought,
Dad, how did you know this song?
I was like, Dad, you're a genius. And he was like, no, that's something I knew from when I was a kid. My dad super twigged on comedy and stand-up comedy. And he was always listening to comedy albums in the car. And I had Bobcat Goldthwait's Meet Bob memorized, Emo Phillips. He also really liked Sam Kinison, which was not necessarily my thing, but he took me to see Elaine Boozler when I think I was 11 or 12 years old. We went to go see her at a theater in Dallas. She was the first female club stand-up, because certainly there'd been women's stand-ups on television, your Phyllis Dillers and your Joan Rivers and stuff. But Elaine was the first touring on the road female comic. And I saw her special on HBO and I just thought she was the most wonderful. And I still think she's the most wonderful. As she was closing her set at that time, she asked the audience, "Do you guys have any questions?" And I yelled out from the audience a joke that I had just heard. And I said, "Why do dogs have black lips?" And she said, "I don't know why." And I was like, "Oh, I'm asking you." And then the audience laughed at a little kid love heckling Elaine Boosler, which I told Elaine in the last couple of years. And she's like, "That's really cute." She was nice about it. But I'm like, "You were really nice about it. I was an idiot because I was 11 years old, but I just loved you so much." And we've discussed before on the show, my dad's obsession with comedy and interest in comedy is definitely what led me to comedy. I was trying to make him proud of me. My dad also taught me how to change a tire, which not everyone's dad does.
John Beer and I were really struggling to come up with things he taught us. And that was one thing that we both learned from Dad. Apparently, that was the only life skill that he felt like sharing, was how to change a tire.
I used it as recently as Wednesday. I was leaving work. There's a young lady at my office, and it is her first big girl job out of college. And I came out and I had my bike, and she was looking with dismay at a flat tire. And I said, "Oh, what are you going to do?" And she said, "Well, I think I'm just going to drive it to the tire shop." How far?
You're going to destroy your wheel, man.
Yeah, I'm like, "How far is that?" And she goes, 9 minutes. I'm like, "No, why don't you just change it?" And she said, "I don't
just
know
put
how."
on the donut.
Yeah, I helped her put on the donut. And I said, "I hope you've learned how to do this so you know how to do it yourself." And she said, "Back home in North Carolina, if a woman has a flat tire, a man will just like pull over and change it for her." I'm like, "Well, in Portland, none of the men know how to change a tire."
I would also say invest in $30 a month. You can have a AAA membership, which is what I do now.
And it's worth it.
Absolutely. My car broke down just last week. Hey, if AAA would like
AAA
to
wants to
sponsor this
sponsor us.
podcast,
We're
I'm in.
very interested in the sponsorship. See, my dad taught me how to solder. I've used it a little bit.
You used to use it a lot because you would make this weird jewelry.
Yeah, I would make weird solder jewelry. And then for a while when I was teaching a robotics program to kids, my kids were constantly pulling the wires between the motors and the battery packs. So I had to solder those back together. And did it make me cry a little bit? Yes, it did.
Each time?
Definitely several times. The smell of solder, the smell of the melting solder material is a very nostalgic smell for me.
It always reminded me of Terminator 2. Not the smell, but the metallic orbs of jellyish stuff.
I see. The melting solder reminded you of the bad Terminator who could become liquid metal and later was in X-Files and still later was Peacemaker's dad. We talked a little bit about how if you could glom onto one of Dad's hyper-focuses, you had a friend for life, but he would also design stuff into that. I've talked about this on the Jackie Cation podcast, Dork Forest. When Douglas Adams had massive sci-fi hits with his book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and the sequel, The Restaurant at the End of the Universe, Dad bought both those books in paperback and he brought them home. And in my memory, I was like 8 or 9, but I was always already reading like a crazy person. He said, "We're going to have a race. Pick which book you want to read. And then I'm going to read the other book. And then whoever finishes the book first has to take the other person out for ice cream."
So who won?
I won because I didn't have a job.
He didn't have the money.
I did not have the money to take anybody out for ice cream. So I knew I had to read this book faster. But I found it so funny and obsessed over Douglas Adams for the whole rest of my life up until today. It's been
Today is the day it ends.
Today's the day it's all over with me and Doug Adams. I definitely got that from my dad. I also was trying to read Robert Ludlum like spy novels in the 70s and 80s, books that dads read. Now it would be a Tom Clancy book. I would take his used paperbacks to school. My teacher confiscated one. She was like, "This is not for kids."
Neither is Dean Koontz, which I read.
Read the crap out of. Oh, yeah. Many, many pulp authors my dad was super into, and we would definitely pick up on. Our dad was also super into languages and
specifically German
and French. He even farted around with Japanese a little bit. It was of a generation that learned Latin in school. And so he had that base for all the Romance languages. I was always really impressed by that my dad was a polyglot and wanted to emulate it. When he passed, we were going through his stuff to see like what we wanted to take home. And one of the things I took was a book on expanding your vocabulary in German, which I kind of use.
Has really come into use as of late. Turning to Jean-Pierre. I was at home by myself at 13, and a person came to the door who was selling things for charity. I didn't want to turn them away, so I bought a blue candle for $5 of my own money. When Dad came home, I told him that I bought the candle for charity and asked if he would reimburse me for it. He looked at it and said, "Gee, I'm not really in the market for a blue candle right now." He paid me anyway and told me that I could keep the candle. Dad and I went to see the Chris Rock movie CB4 together. I really liked it, and in the car afterwards, I asked him what he thought of it. He said sternly, "It was just okay." I was surprised he didn't like it because it was so funny. Then a few days later, I overheard him quoting CB4 to Cheryl. And over the next few days, whenever he had a conversation with someone, he kept bringing up CB4 and how funny it was. I was like, what the heck is wrong with this guy? He told me he hated it. A few years later, I went home to visit Dad, and he said, "Hey, I bought a copy of CB4. Want to watch it together?"
Oh, that was how he identified with people. That was how he would bond.
There's a movie called Trading Places.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with the film Trading Places, but
my own mother asked me the question, who is Billy Ray Valentine Capricorn?
Right.
I said, you're no mother of mine.
Where have you been, Donna? She was doing her own thing. And by that, I mean all of the housework and child rearing.
She was not time to kick up her heels and watch Trading Places 500 times.
Again and again and again. It's a John Landis film. It's a very, very funny, very tightly written film. It has a lot of humor that is not appropriate now.
Yeah. There's a lot of questionable, or what the kids would call sus
humor in it, but it's a much better Christmas movie than Die Hard.
Accurate. I asked Jean-Pierre if he had ever gotten any good advice from Dad. He said he once told me when you go on a date to take twice as much cash as you expect to spend. Good advice then, but obsolete now. But I said, I don't know about that. I think that's a good idea for any outing. Take twice as much as you think you're going to spend, because
be over-prepared.
Make sure that your debit card has enough money on it to have twice as much as you thought you would spend.
I find myself quoting my dad in arguments and like business situations all the time. When I would have a conversation with him, especially when I was in trouble for something or like trying to make an excuse for something, he would say, "Well, that's interesting.
It's not really relevant.
It's not really relevant. It doesn't really have anything to do with anything." And I do wind up reaching for that again and again. Quote my dad the other day when I was in traffic. I said, "Who are all these people and where are they going?"
That does sound like something our father would say. Jean-Pierre also said, once I was playing with a video game with a light zapper, and you point the gun at the game and you shoot the enemy on the screen. He looked at it and said, "Wait, how does it know where you're pointing?" And he looked down the barrel of the zapper and started theorizing about how it worked. That was probably the most important lesson. Be curious and strive to understand how things work.
Yeah. My dad was an early computer programming guy. Something that I witnessed about him was that in that line of work, you never, ever stopped learning. He was always learning new languages and new tools. And he always had those big binders of stuff that he was teaching himself in his off hours. I think always being curious and always seeking information is a good way to go through life. In the first kind of social media-ish website, I believe, there was a joke in the 80s that every movie could be connected through 6 degrees to Kevin Bacon, that Kevin Bacon had been in so many movies and been in so many movies with other stars who'd been in other movies, that you could connect every performer in every film to Kevin Bacon within 6 degrees. And there was a website called 6 Degrees that attempted to prove that every human on the planet could connect with other human through 6 degrees.
That's also a board game now.
Oh, my father hyper-focused on this website. And it was very strange because he liked talking and he liked being social and he liked being funny. He didn't always have a ton of friends. He would have work friends and stuff.
He had a lot of acquaintances.
He spent so much time on this website. At one point, my father was very proud to show me that he had the most friends on the website 6 Degrees, millions and millions of friends, although he was quite soon ousted by a guy from Sri Lanka.
Well, you have those moments. Jean-Pierre also said, not being funny, but I think the best thing that Dad taught me was how not to live. Being a bad example is instructive. And I said, okay, well, give me some examples of what he taught you. And he said, get regular exercise, don't smoke, be present, listen, and don't dismiss other people. And I said, you know what? That's very interesting because I have also, in many ways, led my life as 180 degrees from what my dad did. And mine are focus on family over romantic partnership, show up for important life events, pay attention to your children, keep a work-life balance, pay your taxes, pay attention to nonverbal communication, invest in friendships, wait for technology to wear out before you replace it, define yourself outside of the thing that you do to make money and what you own, and be faithful to your partner.
Those are all good lessons. The one that I am really picking up on right now is work-life balance. My dad, I think he had received a communication from society that the only thing he was good for was providing money. Because he spent all of his time just on the computer, you could never really tell when he was futzing around and when he was actually doing work. He worked his tail off. He was caught in the Enron scandal and he lost a lot during that. He did get some money out of it, but in the end, they're not making a podcast about him.
No,
Like
he netted very little.
He netted very little. I think he got a lot of his self-esteem from being smart and from being the smartest guy in the room and from having a lot of skills. But those weren't real relationships. His boss came out to the memorial we had for him.
A lot of coworkers came out.
Yeah. But they're not thinking about him the way we are.
No, he does matter a little, but he will fade in their memory.
It's not where you want to put your life energy. I think that's a really good lesson.
I remember after his second or third heart attack, his girlfriend was leaving town and she needed me to basically babysit him and make sure that he was okay because he was still unsteady and having some issues. He took me to his office, his last office, and it was just this dingy, horrible place. And there were ants crawling in the walls and it just looked terrible. And I thought, how is it that this man, his whole life has been about his professional career and this is where he's landed at the end? But I just thought my office is 10,000 times nicer than this one.
Yeah.
And that's really sad because I haven't worked as hard as he has.
Agreed.
My mother contributed a couple things. She said, when I was feeling trapped at home, he seemed to always be available on the phone to listen to me when he was working. So he would listen to her complain and whatever, and he would just lend an ear. It was revealed that Jennifer Beals had a body double for the more complicated dance sequences in Flashdance. Your dad pretended that Emily, as a 1-year-old, was a Flashdance body double and had a series of special camera sequences that had been stretched out and manipulated to make her look like an adult woman.
I forgot that was a dad bit. I remember that we would hold Emily up by her armpits and then one of us would operate her legs and do the little fast.
She loved that song. Like she would do the dance on her own. That was Dad's thing. He was like, oh, it's all camera angles. That's Emily the whole time. Mom said he had a great sense of humor. Apparently, his mother usually wore a damp towel around her head. I don't remember that at all. But John promised to wrap a towel around her head when she lay in her casket so that people would recognize her. He did not make good on that promise.
His mother wore a wig when she was out. If you came to see her and she was not out, she was wearing a towel. Well, we were talking about movies. Besides Trading Places, my father watched Airplane again and again, and so did we. He watched Top Secret and Real Genius. We've all watched.
We watched Real Genius a lot. I don't know he did. That was on cable all the time.
Yeah. I seem to remember him enjoying it because it was about Cal Arts. It was about a smart kids school. And he went to Rice, and that was a big part of his identity. The Harvard of the South, although I don't know if that's true. Naked Gun, he loved those movies, which I could not get into as much. He loved Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles. Again, a movie with a lot of
problematic humor.
Sus humor, but it's very wonderful in many ways as well. My childhood nickname is from that movie, Froggy, because of a scene that Harvey Korman has in a bathtub with a rubber frog. Laura, what are some nice things you remember about Dad?
When I was 13, my friend Christina Garduno invited me to move to Scotland and live with her and her mother. And my father was totally supportive of this. He shared that he wanted me to see the world, to experience different cultures and have adventures when I was still young, which is pretty cool. He was looking into getting me a passport and doing all the things. But then Christina decided to take Billy Gaston instead because she wanted to sleep with him and did not want to sleep with me.
She took Billy Gaston to Scotland?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I think he wouldn't sleep with her, so she kicked him out. He was homeless in Scotland for a while.
That is much more recent information about Big Bill Gaston than I have.
When I first moved to Austin, I surprisingly got lost in this very weird part of town that I'd never seen or heard of. And my father, from memory, this is pre-MapQuest, he gave me turn-by-turn directions until I found my destination. He had not lived in Austin in 20-something years.
In a pre-MapQuest world, and I think this is, if you ever ask yourself, was John Ryan on the spectrum?
100%.
100%. He had street maps of cities that he had lived in for years. You could talk to him about any city, even sometimes cities he'd visited. He could tell you how to get around. It was absolutely bizarre.
Well, and it was so different from me because I have no
Right.
memory of any place that I've ever been. He used to come to my soccer games, and when he did, I could hear his booming voice shouting supportive things when I was even on the other end of the field.
That is nice.
He called me every Sunday until he died.
I know he got you singing lessons because he really thought you had a beautiful voice, which you do. But I was very proud of him when he took singing lessons, although his taste in music was always kind of bad. One time I got into the Mazda and I was like, Dad, are you listening to opera? And he's like, yeah, Phantom.
Yeah, he made me go see that horrible play. Speaking of dad and music, I remember we were standing in the kitchen. He was saying, you have such a beautiful voice. You should really take lessons. So he paid for me to go to private singing lessons for years and years.
That's awesome.
He gave me my first and only power drill. I still have it. When I was 18, he and I were listening to Frank's Wild Years by Tom Waits.
Mm-hmm.
The lyrics are, one night Frank was on his way home from work, stopped at the liquor store, picked up a couple of Mickey's Big Mouths, drank him in the car on his way to the Shell station. He got a gallon of gas in a can, drove home, doused everything in the house, torched it, parked across the street, laughing, watching it burn, all Halloween orange and chimney red. Then Frank put on a top 40 station, got on the Hollywood freeway, headed north.
Never could stand that dog.
So we each had a Mickey's Big Mouth on the porch and listened to that together.
Oh,
he wanted to know what is a Mickey's
Big Mouth? It's not high quality.
It's a malt liquor.
It's a malt liquor, Dad. I started going out very young, and like my little friends would come get me and would go down to Deep Ellum and stuff. And he sometimes would sleep behind the front door so that I would wake him up so he knew that I got home.
That is very sweet. I remember he once told me, if you ever need a ride, if you find yourself in a scary situation, I will pick you up, no questions asked. And I did take him up on it once because everybody I was with was doing inhalants and it was really scary. And I was like, I can't get in the car with that person. And he picked me up and I was, I think, 14 and definitely inebriated. And he said nothing and I was not in trouble.
That's great.
Meaningful.
Our dad bought us both our first cars, which is nice. It's definitely not a given in our family. He bought me my dream car because I wanted to be Molly Ringwald in Pretty in Pink so badly. He bought me a Carmen Ghia. I did not take care of it. I was not a good driver.
You did a thing we call run it into the ground.
I ran it into the ground, but I truly loved it. And I still have fond memories of that car.
We sold that car to Lee Rayna for $50.
I know you did. Wasn't really yours to sell. That's fine.
I think I had Dad's permission, so it was. Dad taught me how to drive a standard car. He taught me how to make chicken fried steak. He taught me how touchscreens worked. He told me to never leave the laptop open, no matter what. And that has definitely served me because they fall off tables a lot. And when they're open, bad things happen. He has helped me with every technical problem that I've ever had. That was one of the hardest pills to swallow when he died, is that I don't have a tech support person. Right. I saw the film Magnolia when it was released in December 1999, and I watched the scene with Philip Seymour Hoffman, Tom Cruise, and Jason Robards, where Tom Cruise is screaming at Jason Robards, who is unconscious, and he's screaming, "You effing a-hole, don't leave me." I decided that I didn't want to be Tom Cruise when my father was dying, so I would say everything I needed to say to him when he was still alive. I told all my siblings to come and have a fake deathbed moment with our dad. It was ended up just being me, Emily, and Mom, and we gathered around him on a recliner, and he sat quietly and listened and apologized.
That is nice. He also bought me a Carmen Ghia. He taught me to drive a stick shift car. I have held on to that technology long past its usefulness. I still drive a stick shift today. Who does it impress? Other dads.
I've noticed that my last 3 boyfriends can't drive my car because nobody knows how to drive a stick anymore. When I was driving my car back home, a cardinal flew into the grill and I looked down and saw its brushed body and its eyeball hanging out. He told me to go inside and he took it out and washed the guts off my car for me.
That's big dad energy, BDE.
Last but not least, I asked him for a small amp for singing and instead he got me a microphone, stand, speakers, and amplifiers for Christmas. I also told him that my brother could live with me on the condition that my father paid his rent. He agreed, and when Jean-Pierre moved out, I asked him if he would keep sending me money until my student loans were paid off. He kept his end of the bargain until I had paid off all loans. So here's a couple of facts about father relationships. This is from the Pediatric Associates of Franklin, the importance of a father in a child's life. Fathers not only influence who we are inside, but who we have relationships with as we grow. The way a father treats his child will influence what he or she looks for in other people. Friends, lovers, and spouses will all be chosen based on how the child perceived the meaning of the relationship with his or her father. The pattern a father sets in relationships with his children will dictate how the children relate to other people.
I believe that the partners that I chose while he was alive, I was definitely trying to impress him with smart people. I focused on people who had relevant interests. In the Imago model, we are picking our partners based on the best and worst qualities of our parents. All of my serious relationships, the guys have had a lot of the good and bad traits of my dad. So that's true.
If you're interested in finding out more about Imago therapy, you should listen to Lego My Imago, another episode that we've done.
Learned quite a lot. You learned quite a lot.
So young girls depend on their fathers for security and emotional support. A father shows his daughter what a good relationship with a man is like. If a father is loving and gentle, his daughter will look for those qualities in men when she's old enough to begin dating. If a father is strong and valiant, she will relate closely to men of the same standard. As we know, my father didn't have those qualities. And so Virginia and I have really struggled.
We've made other choices.
In closing, I'm going to read a couple quotes from Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. How to heal from distant, rejecting, or self-involved parents. Emotionally immature people don't step back and think about how their behavior impacts others. There's no cringe factor for them, so they seldom apologize or express regret. They act as though being parents exempts them from respecting boundaries or being considerate. Remember, you can't expect immature, emotionally phobic people to be different from how they are. So what we're looking for and what I strive to be is an emotionally mature parent. And unfortunately for my dad, part of it is his own fault, but a lot of it isn't. A lot of it is the parents he had and the life he had and the cards he was dealt and his neurodivergence and all of those things too. Emotionally mature people have a secure sense of self. They don't feel threatened when other people see things differently, nor are they afraid to seem weak if they don't know something. When you have an insight to share with them, they listen and consider what you tell them. They may not agree, but thanks to their natural curiosity, they'll try to understand your point of view. John Gottman, well known for his research into relationships and marital stability, describes this trait as a willingness to be influenced by others and counts it among his 7 principles for a sustainable, happy relationship. I do feel like our father was willing at times to accept our influence, especially when I was an adult.
You and I have talked about this recently. Our dad had many strengths and things that I really respected him for and admired, and some of which I've tried to carry through into my own life. And he had many flaws. At the end of the day, you have to say, well, these are the things, good and bad, that have led me to being the person that I am. And if you like the person you are, you have to say, well, a lot of that good things and bad things are from my dad.
If I look at it as 180 lessons, he's taught me a lot of really, really valuable lessons through his errors.
But he also taught me a lot of very good lessons about work, about managing people, about technology, not necessarily about interpersonal relationships, but a lot of his wisdom reverberates within me today.
Yeah, it still holds. So here's the last thing I'm going to say from the book. Emotional intimacy involves knowing that you have someone you can tell anything to, someone to go to with all of your feelings about anything and everything. You feel completely safe opening up to the other person, whether it's in the form of words, through an exchange of looks, or just by being together quietly in a state of connection. Emotional intimacy is profoundly fulfilling, creating a sense of being seen for who you really are. It can only exist when the other person seeks to know you, not judge you.
Hashtag goals, guys.
So, Virginia, in closing, what are your final thoughts on our dad?
Well, this has been a really nice episode. I do think about him a lot around his birthday. Every year, his death is earlier and earlier because every year I'm a year older and he stays the same age.
That's a Matthew McConaughey quote from a famous Texas-based film.
So this has been nice. It is nice to think a little bit about our dad and talk a little bit about our dad. As you know, I lost a friend this week who, while you would never say looking at him was like my dad, and my dad certainly thought he was a weirdo, I have a lot of the same feelings around his death of being sad that nothing could ever get better.
So a sense of regret.
Right. So I'm having a lot of mirror feelings and like re-traumatization around the death of our father. So this has been nice. What are your final thoughts?
My final thoughts are, I think the gift of his passing is that he can't mess up anymore and he can't hurt me anymore. I can, from this safe, comfortable distance, reflect on ways where he did get things right. I think he was doing his best. I don't take his behavior personally anymore. He just had a lot of hard stuff happening at the same time, and a lot of stuff that like you said, he wasn't going to be able to overcome.
Right.
I do feel like the 180 lessons have been really, really valuable to me and have really led and guided my life today.
And we were talking about this earlier. I think a really important lesson about family and about trauma is that it is kind of cute to hate your dad when you're 20. And like that 100% was where I was.
I was 1,000,000%. If you were 100, I was 1,000,000 at 20.
Right. Just shooting both birds. I'm not going to do what you say. Anything he wanted me to do, I would do the opposite. But when you get into your 30s and 40s, it's just your own life you're ruining. And you have to figure out a way to manage your feelings, to accept that this person is who he is. The dad quote is, he came by that trauma honestly enough.
I remember having a client sit down with me once, and their mother was schizophrenic and their father was bipolar, unmedicated. And I remember having so much compassion for her. And then I thought, why do I not have the same compassion for my dad?
Right. Who was exactly in that situation. I do think he was doing the best he could. My biggest regret about my dad is that he never seemed to figure out how to be happy. And I think that maybe is a waste of a life.
Well, I think he was happy briefly when I forced his nurses at the hospital to give him antidepressants. He was amazing for about 2 months. And then he decided he felt too weird and had to stop.
Yeah.
Like that was another thing. If you're feeling mentally unwell, take medication. It works.
Right. If you've never felt good your whole life.
Why start now?
It can feel weird.
So Virginia, if someone's trying to look at your content on the internet, how would they find you?
You can find me at www.virginia.com. You can also go Google Virginia Jones, which is Virginia. I spoke to a gentleman yesterday who very enthusiastically said, "Oh, my sister's name is Virginia." And then he misspelled my name the way everybody misspells it, leaving that third I out. Because you get to one I and you're like, okay. And you get to two I's, you're like, well, that's a lot. And you get to three I's, you're like, nobody needs three I's in their name.
Sounds like right. 3 too many.
We're going to put this lady's name down as Virginia. So Virginia is my TikTok, which I'm going to get back to my TikTok soon. Love you guys. You can always reach out to our podcast at hello@mysistersatherapist.com. Or if you'd like to hire us to speak for appearances, to powwows, talkbacks, you can write us at hireus@mysistersatherapist.com.
What's a talkback?
It's when people ask you questions and you talk back.
Oh, I see. Also, if you have stories about my dad that are good, send them to hello@mysistersatherapist.com.
Studio to us. We'd love to hear them. Laura, where can people find you on the internet?
They can find me at lauraryan.org. They can also find me on my TikTok. I am Laura Ryan. If they want to look at our content, they can find it on Instagram at My Sister's a Therapist, or they can go to our webpage, mysistersatherapist.com. All of our episodes are on there.
Laura, this is the part of the podcast where you sometimes share a listener review. I understand that you have a very special one this week.
I do. This is dedicated to John Freeman, who is no longer with us. He's succumbed to his disease, and it's very sad.
And we love you very much.
We do. And a lot of our listeners are also friends with John Freeman. So I thought I would share this. This was an email that he wrote me at the very beginning of our podcast. I just listened to the first episode of the podcast that you're doing with Virginia. And even though I generally despise podcasts as a rule, I absolutely loved it. You guys are so good together. And you really nailed the friend zone in a way that I hadn't thought of it before. I want you to know that I consider both of you guys in my top 5 best friends of all time. Anyway, I love your podcast, and it seems like you're doing great. Shoot me a line sometime just to catch up because I miss you. Much love, John. Do you have a John quote that we could close with?
I want to close with a piece of wisdom John Freeman taught me. He said, "Don't lick the sun. It's really hot."
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See,
Well,
I made you cry.
You both got gotten.